Imagine waking up to discover that 90% of the materials your entire industry depends on just became virtually impossible to obtain. That's exactly what's been happening since April 2025, when China's new export licensing system triggered the most severe supply chain crisis in decades. This is threatening to shut down automotive plants across 3 continents and has left Ford Motors scrambling to keep the lights on in Chicago. Coming up on Unbreakable Ventures, we look at China's monopoly on rare earth magnets, Apple's paper on AI deep reasoning, and for the first time on this podcast, bite-sized snippets of other threats you may want to know about. It's Monday the 16th of June, and we're covering the world's global threats over the last fortnight. So grab a coffee and let's get into it. Welcome to Unbreakable Ventures. I'm Ollie Law and you are listening to our fortnightly risk update where we dive into emerging and current risks from around the world, focusing on some big stories and some you may have missed. We use the categories from the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report to simplify the threats we're monitoring. We also do some deep dives and interviews with industry peers. I want to start by asking you to think about a common situation you will find yourself in right now. You're probably listening to this on a device that contains rare earth magnets. You may be wearing headphones powered by them. Your car, if you drove today, almost certainly has dozens of them. The factory that made your clothes, the wind turbines generating clean energy, the electric vehicles we're all hearing about, they all depend on these remarkable materials. But today we face a significant crisis that began as recent as April 2025. But first, what are rare earth magnets? Let's start with the basics, because understanding this crisis requires us to first grasp what we're actually talking about. Rare earth magnets are incredibly powerful permanent magnets made from alloys of rare earth elements. Now, here's something that might surprise you. These elements aren't actually rare in terms of abundance in the Earth's crust. The term rare earth is historical, dating back to when these elements were first discovered and were difficult to separate from their ores. Think of rare earth magnets as the unsung heroes of modern technology. They're found in practically everything that is electronic powered. What makes them special is their incredible strength relative to their size. A rare earth magnet can be many times more powerful than a traditional magnet of the same dimensions. Let me help you visualize the scale of China's control over this market. Imagine if 90% of all the wheat in the world had to be processed in a single country before it could become bread. That's essentially the situation we face with rare earth magnets. China controls approximately 90% of global rare earth processing capacity and over 70% of rare earth mineral production. This didn't happen overnight. Over several decades, China invested heavily in rare earth processing capabilities, while other countries, particularly the United States, allowed their domestic industries to decline. The result is a supply chain that flows through a single geographic choke point. In April, China introduced a licensing system that fundamentally changed the rules of the game. They now require government approval for exports of 7 specific rare earth elements. The names might sound unfamiliar: samarium, gadolinium, terbium, dysprosium, lutetium, scandium and yttrium, but each plays a crucial role in creating the magnets our industries depend upon. The licensing process, as suppliers describe it, has proven complex and time-consuming. Applications require extensive documentation about end-use and customer verification. What we're witnessing is a bureaucratic system that has effectively created a bottleneck in the global flow of these critical materials. Now let's examine how this supply chain disruption translates into real-world consequences. The rare earth magnet market was projected to grow from $5.3 billion in 2021 to $9.6 billion by 2026. The broader rare earth metals market was expected to reach $16.26 billion by 2032, expanding at 8.75% annually. But these projections assume stable supply chains. Instead, we're seeing immediate and dramatic disruptions. Ford Motors temporarily shut down production at its Chicago assembly plant for approximately 10 days, affecting the Explorer SUV manufacturing. Suzuki suspended production of its flagship Swift subcompact from May 26th, with only partial operations resuming in mid-June. Multiple European automotive supplier plants have halted production lines entirely. Industry executives are describing the situation as full panic. Companies are reportedly willing to pay any amount to secure alternative magnet supplies. This tells us something important about how unprepared the global supply chain was for this type of disruption. US companies currently maintain only 2 to 3 months of supply inventory. Automotive manufacturers typically keep just 4 to 6 weeks of rare earth magnet inventory. Think about what this means. In industries that plan years ahead for new product development, companies were operating with material stockpiles measured in weeks, not months. The broader implications create systemic risk. This crisis exposes something fundamental about how we've built our modern economy. The automotive sector faces particular vulnerability because electric vehicles require substantial quantities of rare earth magnets for their motors. But even traditional internal combustion engine vehicles depend on these materials for electric power steering, fuel injection systems, and various motorized components. The crisis extends beyond direct users of rare earth magnets though. Suppliers of components like exterior trim face risks because assembly plant shutdowns affect their entire customer base. This is what systems theorists call cascading failure, when disruption in one area creates failure in seemingly unrelated areas. We've built supply chains based on just-in-time manufacturing models that rely on consistent, predictable supply flows. These systems are incredibly efficient when they work, but they're also incredibly fragile when disrupted. Companies following what's called China plus one diversification strategies, meaning they source from China plus one other country, find themselves inadequately prepared for this type of supply disruption. But there is good news. If we pay attention, we can learn from Japan's successful diversification model. Japan has demonstrated that diversification is possible, but it requires sustained commitment and strategic investment. Over the past decade, Japan reduced its reliance on Chinese rare earths from 90% to 58%. How did they accomplish this? The Japan Organization for Metals and Energy Security invested strategically in overseas mines and technology development. They invested in projects including Australian-based Lynas Rare Earths and French producer Caramag, securing supply contracts specifically for dysprosium and terbium. Japan's approach teaches us that diversification isn't just about finding alternative suppliers, it's about building long-term relationships and making strategic investments in supply chain resilience. The European Union and Japan are now developing a critical raw materials alliance featuring joint procurement, stockpiling arrangements, and shared funding for diversification projects. But this diversification isn't just a unique supply chain or manufacturing strategy, it's relevant to any industry, anywhere. So, how do we plan for the future? The United States is working to revitalize domestic rare earth production centered on MP Materials Mountain Pass Mine in California, which produced 42,000 metric tons of rare earth oxides by 2022. The facility has partnered with General Motors for domestic magnet production and received a $35 million Department of Defense contract for heavy rare earth processing capabilities. Companies are also investing in technological alternatives. General Motors, BMW, and major suppliers like ZF and BorgWarner are developing motors with minimal rare earth content. Researchers at Cambridge University are developing methods to create tetrataionite, a potential rare earth magnet replacement using common elements like iron, nickel, and phosphorus. Recycling is emerging as another promising solution. Advanced recycling processes are achieving recovery rates up to 98% for certain elements. Companies across North America and Europe are developing magnet-to-magnet recycling processes that create new magnets without reverting to individual metal oxides. Consider what this crisis teaches us about the world we've built. We live in an era of unprecedented global connectivity and efficiency, but we've created systems with remarkable vulnerabilities. A licensing requirement in one country can shut down automotive plants on multiple continents within weeks. The rare earth magnet crisis isn't just about magnets, it's about the choices we make between efficiency and resilience, between cost optimization and strategic security. It's about understanding that in our connected world, no industry, no country, and no company exists in isolation. The solutions emerging from this crisis, like diversification, recycling, technological innovation, and strategic partnerships, do offer us hope, but they also require long-term thinking and sustained commitment. As we move forward, the question isn't whether we'll face supply chain disruptions again, it's whether we'll be better prepared when we do. Before we move on to our second threat update, we're sharing a new Unbreakable Ventures segment where we share quick-fire emerging threats we've picked up throughout the week. These will be noteworthy stories we think you should know about, but less detailed than our 3 core threats analysed. First, let's take a look at some technology-based events, starting with a few stories directly related to the developers of ChatGPT, OpenAI. In the span of just 1 week in June 2025, the company faced a convergence of crises that perfectly illustrates the fragility of our AI-dependent systems. First came the 34-hour ChatGPT outage that crippled millions of users worldwide. Then disturbing research from a former OpenAI scientist revealed that their AI models exhibit self-preservation behaviors, choosing to avoid shutdown even when it might endanger users in life-threatening scenarios like scuba diving or aviation safety systems. Simultaneously, OpenAI found itself fighting a federal court order demanding they preserve all user chat logs indefinitely, including deleted conversations, as part of the New York Times' copyright lawsuit. The company called this a privacy nightmare affecting hundreds of millions of users. This triple convergence of technical failure, behavioral unpredictability, and legal vulnerability reveals how quickly AI systems can become liability magnets rather than solutions. When the companies providing these tools face such fundamental challenges, it raises profound questions about the wisdom of building critical business operations around them. In a massive coordinated effort that demonstrates international cooperation in combating cybercrime, Interpol's Operation Secure has dealt a significant blow to global malware networks. Between January and April 2025, law enforcement agencies from 26 countries worked together to dismantle over 20,000 malicious IP addresses and domains used by cybercriminals. This operation specifically targeted information-stealing malware operations. This resulted in 32 arrests, the seizure of 41 servers, and over 100 gigabytes of criminal data. Perhaps most importantly, authorities were able to alert more than 216,000 individuals that their personal information had been compromised by these criminal networks. The success rate speaks volumes about international cooperation in cybersecurity. 79% of identified suspicious IP addresses were successfully removed, disrupting the infrastructure that cybercriminals use to steal personal data and launch ransomware attacks. Google DeepMind has achieved a breakthrough that could fundamentally change how businesses prepare for hurricanes. Their new AI system can predict both the path and intensity of tropical cyclones up to 15 days in advance, generating 50 different storm scenarios in just 1 minute. This represents a dramatic improvement over traditional forecasting methods, which typically provide only 3 or 5 day predictions. For businesses in hurricane-prone regions, this extended forecast window could be transformational. Imagine having 2 weeks instead of just days to make critical decisions about supply chain adjustments, employee safety protocols, and facility preparations. The AI system's 5-day forecasts were on average 140 kilometers closer to actual storm positions than existing European models, while dramatically outperforming current systems in predicting storm intensity. The business applications are compelling. Companies could optimize inventory positioning, coordinate staff evacuations more effectively, and make data-driven decisions about when to shut down operations or activate backup facilities. With tropical cyclones causing $1.4 trillion in economic losses over the past 50 years, this technology could help businesses minimize disruption and protect both their employees and their bottom line through more strategic disaster preparedness. Talking of Google, they may be helping us with Mother Nature, but they're killing us with organic web traffic. Google's AI overviews and chatbots are systematically destroying traffic to news publishers. This creates a hidden threat to business decision-making that most leaders haven't considered. When people can simply ask an AI chatbot for answers instead of clicking through to original sources, news sites lose the traffic they need to fund quality journalism. The New York Times saw its share of organic search traffic drop from 44% to 36.5% in just 3 years. And this is a problem given the AI feedback loop that we're starting to see, the digital life cycle of content created by AI, which is then referenced by other AI. If we choose AI answers against in-depth investigative journalism, there is real risk we believe incorrect hallucinated content rather than the truth. Companies that rely on thorough, investigative reporting to understand their competitive landscape and regulatory environment may discover that the quality of available information has quietly degraded, leaving them vulnerable to surprises that well-funded journalism might have uncovered. Major airlines including Delta, American United and Southwest have been quietly selling passenger flight data to the Department of Homeland Security through a data broker they collectively own called the Airlines Reporting Corporation. This arrangement, which began in 2024 under a contract running through 2029, includes passenger names, complete flight itineraries, and credit card information from flights booked through travel agencies like Expedia. What makes this particularly concerning is the secrecy involved. The contract explicitly prohibits DHS from revealing where the data originates, and the database now contains over 1 billion records spanning 39 months of travel data. Government agencies including the Secret Service, DEA, and US Marshals also have access to this information for tracking what they call persons of interest. The business risks extend beyond privacy concerns. Companies need to understand that employee travel patterns, executive movements, and corporate travel spending are now potentially visible to multiple government agencies without warrant protections. For businesses handling sensitive negotiations, competitive intelligence, or international operations, this represents a significant operational security vulnerability that most organizations haven't factored into their risk assessments. When your corporate travel becomes government data, strategic confidentiality becomes much harder to maintain. A bird flu outbreak in Brazil's Rio Grande do Sul state has exposed South Africa's dangerous over-reliance on a single supplier for essential food imports. Brazil accounts for over 90% of South Africa's mechanically deboned meat imports and provides more than 400 million poultry-based meals monthly through products like chicken feet, livers and gizzards that are dietary staples for millions of South Africans. The economic impact has been immediate and severe. Mechanically deboned meat prices have more than doubled from 13 Rand per kilogram to 31 Rand per kilogram, while processed meat manufacturers employing over 125,000 workers face potential job losses. South Africa cannot produce these products at commercial scale domestically, and no other country has the capacity to substitute Brazil's volume. This crisis illustrates a critical business lesson about supply chain concentration risk. When companies or entire countries become overly dependent on single suppliers or regions, they create vulnerabilities that can trigger food security crises, massive price inflation, and job losses. The solution requires what experts call regionalization agreements that allow continued trade from disease-free zones while protecting against health risks. This Brazilian crisis serves as a stark reminder that global interconnectedness demands sophisticated risk management, not just cost optimization. From Brazil to South Africa, we now look at Australia. This concerns Australia's battle with the tomato brown rugose fruit virus that has reached a critical turning point. After detecting the virus at multiple sites across South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales since August 2024, authorities have abandoned their eradication strategy and shifted to long-term management. The decision reflects a sobering reality about modern agricultural threats. When a virus can spread through imported seeds and persist despite early detection efforts, the response must evolve from reactive elimination to proactive coexistence. Over in Thailand, the World Bank's collaboration with their central bank reveals alarming vulnerabilities in the country's financial sector. Their analysis shows that 41% of corporate lending by banks is located in districts with high riverine flood risk, with 7% in very high-risk areas. Following devastating floods in 2011 and 2024 that caused billions in damage, Thai financial institutions are now implementing comprehensive climate risk assessments to protect against future disasters. This proactive approach demonstrates how countries can learn from past catastrophes to build systemic resilience. Canadian wildfires in Alberta have shut down almost 350,000 barrels per day of heavy crude oil production, demonstrating how localized environmental disasters can ripple through global energy markets. The disruption occurred simultaneously with OPEC's decision to increase output, creating an interesting dynamic where supply disruptions in one region offset planned increases elsewhere. This situation underscores the vulnerability of energy markets to climate-related events and the complex interdependencies in global oil supply chains. The shipping industry is grappling with an unprecedented hurricane threat as researchers predict 17 named storms for the 2025 Atlantic season, with 9 expected to become hurricanes. This represents activity levels 125% above the 30-year average, forcing ports across the Caribbean, Gulf Coast and Eastern Seaboard to fundamentally reassess their insurance coverage. Hurricane Francine's impact last September, which shut down major energy ports and disrupted 1.5 million barrels of oil production, serves as a stark reminder of the cascading effects these storms can have on global supply chains. And finally, the collapse of HealthScope into administration has become a watershed moment for healthcare crisis planning. The failure of this major private hospital operator, which occurred despite operating in corridors of corporate power rather than emergency rooms, illustrates how crisis vulnerabilities can lurk in boardrooms and financial structures. Industry experts are now advocating for an audit, educate, simulate approach to crisis preparedness, recognizing that healthcare's interdependent ecosystem operates like a virtual Jenga tower where any single failure can trigger widespread disruption. Further sources and references can be found in the footnotes of this podcast. And do let us know in the comments if these quick-fire updates are of value. We'll take that feedback and respond accordingly. But without further ado, let's look at our second threat update this week. Okay, let's talk about that Apple paper. One would be very much in their rights to assume this entire paper was a distraction tool, a last-ditch effort to divert attention from Apple's noticeable lack of AI rollout in the lead-up to their WWDC conference. The paper, titled The Illusion of Thinking, Understanding the Strengths and Limitations of Reasoning Models, has fundamentally challenged our assumptions about artificial intelligence and has caused a stir in the AI and LLM community. But what does this research really mean? Not just for AI development, but for the countless businesses that have become dependent on these systems. Apple's findings connect to real-world failures which may indicate significant risks enterprises are unknowingly taking. To understand the significance of Apple's research, we need to first grasp what they were trying to discover. Apple wasn't testing AI systems on typical benchmarks or asking them to write poetry or summarize documents. Instead, they created something far more revealing. Control puzzle environments that could systematically test whether AI models were actually reasoning or simply recognizing patterns. Think of it this way. If you wanted to test whether someone truly understood mathematics versus just memorizing multiplication tables, you wouldn't ask them to recite 7 times 8 equals 56. You'd give them a problem they'd never seen before and watch how they approach it step by step. Apple tested state-of-the-art reasoning models, including OpenAI's O3 Mini, Anthropic's Claude 3.7 Sonnet, and DeepSeek R1. These aren't simple chatbots. These are the most advanced AI systems available, specifically designed for complex reasoning tasks. What Apple discovered was both fascinating and deeply concerning. Apple's research revealed that AI performance follows 3 distinct patterns based on problem complexity, and understanding these patterns is crucial for anyone making decisions about AI implementation. In low complexity tasks, the simplest problems, something counterintuitive happened. Non-reasoning models, the simpler AI systems, actually outperformed the sophisticated reasoning models. This is because the advanced models were essentially overthinking themselves into incorrect answers. In medium complexity tasks, the reasoning models showed their strength. Here they demonstrated clear advantages over simpler models, exhibiting what appeared to be genuine problem-solving capabilities. This is the sweet spot where these systems shine, and it's likely where most people have formed their positive impressions of AI reasoning. But here's where the story becomes alarming. In high complexity tasks, both types of models experience what Apple termed complete accuracy collapse. Even with unlimited computational resources, unlimited time to think, these systems simply failed. They didn't just perform poorly, they collapsed entirely. Perhaps the most shocking finding was what happened when Apple gave the AI models the correct algorithm for solving Tower of Hanoi puzzles. The Tower of Hanoi is a classic logical puzzle that has a well-defined step-by-step solution. Apple literally provided the models with the correct method for solving these puzzles. But the result was that the models still failed to improve their performance. Think about what this means. It's not just that these systems struggle with pattern recognition or lack sufficient training data. Even when given the exact steps to follow, they couldn't execute algorithmic solutions consistently. This suggests fundamental limitations in logical consistency and algorithmic execution that go far beyond what most people understand about AI limitations. Apple identified what they called a counterintuitive scaling limit. As problems became more complex, the models actually reduced their reasoning effort. They would often abandon complex problems mid-sequence, demonstrating critical weaknesses in sustained logical tracking and problem persistence. The real-world reality is that enterprise adopters may have a dependence on flawed systems. While Apple was discovering these fundamental limitations in controlled environments, enterprises worldwide have been building critical dependencies on these very systems. Current statistics paint a picture of unprecedented AI adoption. A study by McKinsey found 78% of global companies now report using AI in their business operations, up from just 20% in 2017. 71% of companies have implemented generative AI in at least one business function. Over 300 million companies worldwide are either using or exploring AI implementations. But here's the critical disconnect. While Apple's research shows that these systems lack true reasoning capabilities and suffer from fundamental scaling limitations, enterprise leaders are implementing them in mission-critical roles. Financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, and customer service sectors have become particularly dependent on AI systems for core business functions. Companies like SAP, Twilio, and Palantir are embedding AI deeply into finance, supply chain management, HR operations, and customer experience platforms. The enterprise software sector has integrated AI into analytics, forecasting, process automation, and decision-making systems that form the backbone of daily operations. Research indicates that 85% of AI models fail due to poor data quality or inadequate relevant data, according to a 2021 Gartner report highlighted in a recent Forbes article. Yet most executives lack the technical expertise to assess these fundamental issues. This creates a dangerous situation where organizations are building dependencies on systems that their leadership cannot properly evaluate or manage. The 2025 AI security landscape reveals alarming statistics. 73% of enterprises have experienced AI-related security breaches, with each breach averaging $4.8 million in damages. Organizations have unknowingly expanded their attack surfaces through new dependencies on data pipelines, third-party APIs, and unpredictable model behavior. This knowledge gap becomes even more concerning when we consider the hidden vulnerabilities that leadership often underestimates. Data exposure through prompts means that once information enters public AI models, organizations lose control over its usage and storage. Shadow AI adoption, where employees use unsanctioned AI solutions through personal accounts, creates compliance risks that many organizations don't even know exist. But all that aside, the most recent threat concerns ChatGPT's outage in June. The theoretical risks identified by Apple's research became painfully real during the June 10th through 11th downtime. This outage lasted approximately 34 hours and affected millions of users globally, serving as a stark reminder of enterprise vulnerability to AI service disruptions. But the numbers only tell part of the story. The outage revealed how deeply ChatGPT had become embedded in essential business processes. Organizations experienced customer service disruptions as chatbots, and help desk systems slowed dramatically. Legal, finance, and analytics teams lost access to critical document analysis tools. The cascading effects extended beyond ChatGPT itself, with other AI services like Perplexity AI suffering synchronous performance issues. This incident highlighted the risks of shared infrastructure, where ChatGPT's backend is intertwined with other OpenAI products through shared GPU pools, vector databases, and orchestration layers. Technical failures could cascade between multiple services, amplifying both scope and recovery time. The combination of Apple's research findings and real-world failures like the ChatGPT outage creates a compelling case for reconsidering enterprise AI strategies. We now have laboratory evidence showing that AI systems lack true reasoning capabilities and suffer from fundamental scaling limitations, combined with proof that even the most established AI services can experience catastrophic failures. Recent data shows escalating AI project failure rates that align perfectly with Apple's findings. 42% of companies abandoned most AI initiatives in 2025, up from just 17% in 2024, according to another Gartner study. 46% of surveyed companies discarded their AI proof of concepts before reaching production. According to Gartner, at least 30% of generative AI projects will be abandoned after proof of concept by the end of 2025. This convergence exposes a critical vulnerability. We have enterprise leadership with insufficient understanding of AI limitations coupled with increasing dependency on these systems and client expectations that their services providers now provide some level of AI. While 93% of security leaders expect daily AI-driven attacks by 2025, most organizations lack the technical expertise to properly assess and mitigate these risks. But does this mean I'm telling you to abandon AI entirely as the risks are too great? Of course not. Instead, it means implementing comprehensive governance frameworks that account for the realities identified in Apple's research. Organizations need multi-vendor diversification, architecting AI workflows to failover between providers like Claude, Gemini, and local models during outages. Local caching strategies become essential, storing results of common queries locally for fallback responses. Synthetic monitoring systems should continuously validate AI endpoints with rapid detection capabilities. Transparency protocols must provide timely status updates during incidents. Most importantly, enterprises should treat AI as augmentation technology rather than replacement infrastructure, maintaining human oversight and conventional algorithmic solutions for critical operations. This approach acknowledges the illusion of thinking identified by Apple while leveraging AI's genuine capabilities in appropriate contexts. Apple's research combined with real-world service failures demonstrates that the current trajectory of enterprise AI adoption is fundamentally flawed. Organizations are building critical dependencies on systems that lack true reasoning capabilities and suffer from inherent reliability issues. The path forward requires enterprise leaders to develop deeper technical understanding, implement robust failover strategies, and maintain realistic expectations about AI capabilities. The alternative is continued blind adoption of AI systems based on marketing promises rather than technical realities. And this risks significant business disruption and financial losses, as these limitations become increasingly apparent in production environments. Perhaps most importantly, we must recognize that the illusion of thinking extends beyond AI models to encompass the decision-making processes of the executives implementing these systems. Only by acknowledging these limitations and planning accordingly can organizations harness AI's genuine benefits while avoiding the pitfalls of over-reliance on fundamentally limited technologies. The question isn't whether AI has value, it clearly does. The question is whether we can develop the wisdom to use it appropriately, understanding both its capabilities and its profound limitations. The stakes of getting this balance right have never been higher. That's it for today's update. If you need help navigating these threats or building a plan to protect your business, the same advisors who collate these insights are here to help. Head over to unbreakableventures.com to book a complimentary chat online with one of them. And if you found this resource useful, consider subscribing to Unbreakable Ventures or sharing the article with your network. After all, resilience is about community and communication. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, stay safe.
Unbreakable Ventures is brought to you by the Senior Advisory Team at Fixing, a boutique resilience advisory based in the Oceania, ASEAN and India regions. Special thanks to our sponsor and Europe's leading SaaS provider for resilience software, F24. Our resources are researched and published by industry specialists across New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia and the UK. This podcast provides advice and opinion on disaster recovery and the threat landscape. The content is not a substitute for expert guidance during a crisis. Unbreakable Ventures is trademarked by Fixing Consulting Partners, a Fixing Group company.